How is this land beneath our feet truly formed? For many of us, the answer lies in the sterile, objective domain of geological textbooks, where we are taught that our islands are the product of plate tectonics, the violent eruption of volcanoes, or the slow, agonizing erosion caused by wind and water over millions of years. However, if we look closer at the ancient stories passed down through generations across the Japanese archipelago, we find another truth hidden in plain sight, one that science struggles to reconcile with its measurements. It is the story of Daidarabotchi, a giant of such colossal proportions that his head scraped the very ceiling of the heavens. In these legends, a single swing of his hand could carve out a mountain range. His rhythmic footsteps became the basins for our deepest lakes, and the simple act of him sitting down to rest created the vast plains, where our cities now stand. Such tales may seem absurd or even childish to a modern mind trained in rationalism, yet the physical evidence of his presence remains, etched into the very maps we use today. Have you ever stood before a mountain range and felt, for a fleeting second, that those jagged peaks resembled the spine of a gargantuan beast deep in slumber? Have you ever looked at a secluded pond in the heart of a forest and wondered if it was truly formed by a spring, or if it was once a temporary puddle left in the heel of a titan's footprint? Today, we are going to dive deep into the mystery of Daidarabotchi, the architect of the Japanese islands. We will explore the terrifying traces he left just behind the curtain of our daily reality, and the secrets of a landscape that ancient people may have seen with far more clarity than we do today. By the time you finish listening to this story, the scenery outside your window will never look the same again. I want to ask you now, does your own hometown have any strange landforms or legends about giants? If you know of any, please share them with us in the comments. Let us begin with one of the most famous and baffling coincidences in Japanese geography: the connection between Mount Fuji, the nation's highest peak, and Lake Biwa, its largest body of water. According to legend, Daidarabotchi once sought to create a monument that would reach the gods. To do this, he reached down into the earth of the Omi region, scooping up massive handfuls of soil and rock with his bare hands. The sound of the earth tearing must have been like 1,000 claps of thunder, the smell of ancient clay and crushed minerals filling the air as he stood upright, his shadow stretching across entire prefectures. He carried this immense weight far to the east, to the land of Suruga, where he piled it high to create what we now know as Mount Fuji. The massive gaping hole left behind in the Omi region eventually filled with rainwater and mountain runoff, becoming the vast expanse of Lake Biwa. While many dismiss this as a mere folktale, there is a strange numerical synchronicity that has haunted researchers for years. If one were to calculate the volume of the visible part of Mount Fuji, the result is often cited as approximately. Modern geological surveys by the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure, Transport, and Tourism support this staggering figure, representing a mass so great it actually warps the local gravity. However, if we look at the water volume of Lake Biwa, we find it is approximately. At first glance, this is a massive discrepancy. Fuji is nearly 50 times larger than the current volume of the lake. Yet, for the ancient people who stood on the shores of Lake Biwa and looked toward the horizon, the scale felt identical in its majesty. Perhaps they weren't measuring with cubic kilometers, but with the weight of the spirit. Some theorists suggest that if you account for the entire Omi basin, including the sediment that has filled the region over millennia, the hole left by a giant might actually begin to match the mountain he built. Imagine the sheer determination of such a being, moving, the very foundation of the earth, not for destruction, but to create a masterpiece of symmetry and beauty. Daidarabotchi was not just a force of nature, he was a builder. There are countless stories of him carrying mountains on a giant yoke, only for the pole to snap under the unbearable weight. In those moments, the spilled earth would form smaller, oddly shaped hills that dot the landscape of Shizuoka and Yamanashi today. When you see a lone hill standing in the middle of a flat plain, you are seeing the result of a titan's clumsy accident, a moment of cosmic fatigue frozen in time. If Daidarabotchi were to wake and walk through our modern world, our entire civilization would be pulverized in a matter of seconds. Our tallest skyscrapers would barely reach his ankles, and our massive dams would be nothing more than tiny cracks in the mud to him. But the ancient Japanese did not view him with simple terror. Instead, they held a deep sense of awe, a feeling that he was a godlike entity who had gifted them their very homeland. Have you ever looked at a natural formation, so perfect, so intentional that you felt it couldn't possibly be a product of random chance? The footprints of this giant are not just myths. They are literally written into the names of our cities. In Setagaya, Tokyo, there is a place called Daita. The name itself is derived from the giant's name, marking the spot, where his heavy feet once pressed into the marshy earth. Before it was a bustling residential district covered in asphalt and convenience stores, Daita was known for its peculiar, deep depressions in the ground. Even today, if you look at a topographical map of the area, you can see the subtle remnants of these ancient hollows. Imagine the atmosphere of that time, the silence of the wilderness broken only by the earth-shaking thud of a footstep that spanned kilometers. The air would vibrate, the birds would fall silent, and the very water in the nearby streams would jump from its bed. Similarly, Senzoku-ike in Ota Ward is said to be another one of his footprints. Legend says he stopped there to wash his feet, and the sheer volume of water he displaced created the banks of the pond we see today. For the people living in those times, the sight of a footprint the size of a village must have been a source of existential dread and religious ecstasy. His stride was so vast that he could step over entire mountain ranges or cross the sea with a single movement. In the Akaishi Mountains, which span Nagano and Shizuoka, there are massive, bowl-shaped hollows where he is said to have sat down to rest his weary bones. Hikers often report a strange, heavy energy in these areas, as if the gravity itself is slightly stronger, a lingering echo of the massive weight that once pressed down upon the granite. If you take a map of Japan and begin to connect these footprint sites, a terrifyingly clear picture begins to emerge. A massive route that cuts across the entire archipelago. Is this truly a coincidence? Or is it evidence that this island nation was once home to a form of life that completely ignored the laws of physics as we understand them? From a scientific perspective, these depressions are often explained as the remains of glacial lakes or tectonic shifts from the last ice age. But the sheer resemblance to a human foot, and the fact that these sites are almost always accompanied by specific giant folklore, is a fact that cannot be easily brushed aside. That strange oval pond in your local park might not be a simple, decorative feature. It could be the scar of a titan's claw. When we look into the oldest written records of Japan, such as the Hitachi no Kuni Fudoki from the early 8th century, we find even more concrete descriptions of his existence. There is a record of a giant who lived in a place called Ogushi. The text describes how this being would reach into the sea, pluck out handfuls of giant clams, and toss the shells into a pile that eventually became a mountain. This site, known as the Ogushi Shell Mound, actually exists. Archaeologists have found staggering amounts of shells there, dating back to the Jomon period. While mainstream science attributes this to the collective waste of many generations of humans, the ancient chroniclers saw it differently. They saw a singular, overwhelming presence. They weren't just making up monsters to scare children. They were trying to explain a reality that was too big for their language. But this leads us to a haunting question. Why did such a gargantuan being suddenly vanish from the stage of history? One theory suggests that Daidarabotchi did not die, nor did he leave. Instead, he simply became the landscape. He lay down one last time, and over thousands of years, the wind blew dust into the crevices of his skin, seeds took root in his hair, and rivers began to flow through the valleys of his limbs. The reason the mountains of Japan have such organic flowing curves is that they are mirroring the musculature and skeletal structure of a titan. On days when the mist is thick and the light is dim, you might see the ridge of a mountain shift almost imperceptibly. This isn't just your imagination, it is the lingering mass of a being whose heart beats once every 100 years. Have you ever felt that strange sense of pressure when climbing a mountain, as if you were standing on the back of a living thing that might wake up at any moment? The legends of Daidarabotchi are also intricately tied to the history of ancient trees. It is said that in the dawn of time, Japan was covered in trees so tall they brushed against the moon. When these trees fell, they changed the course of rivers and created new valleys. The only being capable of felling or planting such titans of the forest was Daidarabotchi. In Nagano, there is a legend that the staff he used to support his weight while carrying a mountain was actually a living branch. When he finished his task, he thrust the staff into the earth, where it took root and grew into a massive sacred tree that still stands today. This suggests that he was not just a shaper of stone and soil, but a gardener of the entire ecosystem. His footsteps didn't just destroy, they created space for new life to thrive. Each time he stepped, the earth was tilled on a massive scale, bringing deep, nutrient-rich soil to the surface. The sound of his walking was like the rolling thunder that precedes a life-giving rain. To the ancient people, his presence was a reminder of the raw, unbridled power of the earth, a power that could take life in an instant, but was also the source of all growth. If our modern earthquakes and volcanic eruptions are merely the result of a sleeping giant shifting in his dreams, then our entire concept of disaster prevention is tragically small-minded. We are not fighting nature, we are trying to stay upright on the skin of a god who has forgotten we are here. We must also consider the etymology of the name Daidarabotchi. Many folklorists believe it is related to the word tatara, the ancient Japanese method of iron smelting. In the old days, smelting was a monumental task that required the destruction of entire hillsides to extract iron sand, and the burning of massive amounts of charcoal. The image of men moving mountains and taming ferocious fires may have been the real-world inspiration for the myth of a giant who reshapes the world. In this sense, Daidarabotchi is a symbol of our own industrial ambition, the part of humanity that wants to carve its will into the earth. The red glow of the furnace was the giant's blood, and the smoke from the forge was his breath. However, even if the legend began as a metaphor for technology, it does not explain the sheer physical scale of the anomalies we see. There is a sense that the ancient people were witnessing something that transcended even their most advanced techniques. The sacred sites found across Japan are almost always located where the giant is said to have touched the earth. These places often possess strange magnetic properties or an atmosphere that leaves visitors feeling diminished and humble. Have you ever entered a certain forest or stood atop a certain cliff and felt a sudden, inexplicable sense of weight? It is as if your very cells are remembering a time when a being of infinite mass stood exactly where you are standing. In modern culture, we see Daidarabotchi through the lens of animation and film. In the works of Studio Ghibli, the forest spirit is often shown taking a form that mirrors the legends, a towering, translucent being that walks through the night forest, with plants blooming and dying at every step. This is a beautiful personification of nature's cycle of creation and destruction. But the true Daidarabotchi of folklore is much grittier, a lonely figure of mud and stone who worked in total silence. He was too large to ever hold a conversation with a human, yet he spent his entire existence preparing the world for us. Every river we drink from, every valley we farm, is a result of his solitary labor. If he were to return now and see how we have scarred and polluted the garden he built with such care, what would he do? Would he see us as children to be protected, or as parasites to be brushed away? While there are no modern sightings of the giant himself, our technology has given us a new way to see his tracks. If you spend enough time looking at satellite imagery on Google Earth, you can find landforms in the deep mountains that look disturbingly like human footprints, yet they are miles long. These shapes are invisible to someone standing on the ground. It is only from the perspective of the heavens that the pattern becomes clear. How did the ancients know to describe these as footprints if they couldn't see them from above? Did they have some forgotten means of flight? Or did the giant himself intentionally leave these marks as a message to the future? The mountain ridges that look like faces or the rocks that resemble human figures are not just coincidences. They are the silent language of a creator who has gone to ground. Do you believe that such a being could truly exist, hidden by the sheer scale of his own body? Or is it all just a beautiful fantasy created by ancestors who had a more poetic relationship with the world? Whatever you believe, the next time you walk through the mountains or look out over a vast lake, I want you to remember the story of Daidarabotchi. Look at the horizon and imagine the silhouette of a titan standing there, his head lost in the clouds, his hands heavy with the soil of a new world. The kipekehai, the lingering presence of the giant, is still there, waiting for someone to notice. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the ancient mysteries of our land. This channel is dedicated to exploring the hidden history and strange legends that lie just beneath the surface of our everyday lives. If you found this exploration of Daidarabotchi fascinating, or if it made you look at your own surroundings in a new light, please consider hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support is what allows us to keep digging deeper into these magnificent mysteries. Also, if you have any local stories about giants or strange landforms in your area, please share them in the comments. I read every single one, and your stories might even become the basis for our next video. Let's continue to piece together the grand puzzle of our world's hidden past. Until next time, I look forward to seeing you in our next mysterious story. Thank you so much for watching until the very end.